Referendarius caecus, the common NFL referee, in its natural habitat. I've spent the better part of my career researching these complex and mysterious beasts, and today I think it's time that I go public with my findings. Despite how infamous they are in the world of sports, very little is actually known about the ecological background of this species, and that has turned out to be a very bad thing. Because while every single year is always filled with overreactions and these are the worst refs ever, my research has led me to a much more unfortunate conclusion, one unlike anything that's ever been seen in the natural world. Professional referees are evolving backwards. It's a scary thought, I know, and we're going to get to the bottom of why this has happened and how to fix it, don't worry. But of course, like any good scientist, I need research grants in order to conduct my extremely objective and academic studies. So for that reason, I'd like to thank Manscaped for helping to make this video happen. They've been with us for a long time here on the channel, but for those of you who haven't heard of them, they provide the best men's grooming tools on the market, like the Lawnmower 3.0 electric trimmer and a variety of other products to keep you at your absolute freshest. So if you're interested in taking a look at what they have to offer, head on down to the link below and be sure to use my code SET20 at checkout to get 20% off of your order, as well as the Shed travel bag and a pair of premium boxer briefs free of charge. Not to mention, they also do free shipping. One more for the road, that is SET20 at checkout to immediately simplify looking and feeling your best. So thank you again to Manscaped, and without further ado, let's see where nature went wrong for this very important part of the football ecosystem. Cousins of the zebra, Referendarius caecus are usually a timid but nonetheless important species in the natural order.
How old are you? 36. 36? Man, boy, going on 12.
Like the game of football itself and the millions of other species throughout history, referees have evolved over time, originally wearing white dress shirts and black bow ties, and firing a gun to signal the end of each half. Yes, that's real. But beyond just their aesthetic changes, as football began to develop an audience and take itself more seriously once it started picking up steam in the 1930s, those in charge of officiating had to take themselves more seriously as well. Titans of the football ref landscape like officiating directors Shorty Ray and Art McNally personally developed programs to raise the standard for their consistency and accuracy of their officials, expecting 90+% accuracy on complex problems, and if you screwed up, you're out the door, which significantly strengthened the gene pool of referee talent from generation to generation. And when the concept of film review became more widespread, the officiating department used it to grade and improve their referees on a play-by-play basis, judging the accuracy of their calls and condensing that information into a weekly report to make refs aware of areas they were lacking in. Of course, later came the huge development of instant replay technology, and with it becoming normalized by the turn of the century, every fan now had access to tools that made it clear which calls on the field were made correctly and which ones had been botched in just a matter of a few seconds after the whistle was blown. This obviously would raise what was an already high standard to an even higher level, and with high-profile controversies of the 2000s like the tuck rule game and Super Bowl 40's poorly handled officiating, a subject that was already one of the most highly scrutinized in professional sports was now about to reach a tipping point. The thing is, the technology now available to modern audiences has outpaced and overtaken the instant judgment of on-field human referees. Rational people understand that even the best in the business aren't going to be perfect all the time, but with super slow-mo on HD TVs and 16 billion available angles of a given play, the pressure is at an all-time high for officials to get it right. I mean, it's a ton of pressure, and these are just people at the end of the day. But at the same time, that intense microscope has been part of why recent years have been so mind-boggling as we strain to understand why so much has been missed, over-penalized, or flat out wrong. I mean, not replacement ref levels of wrong, but still wrong.
That's the loudest manure chant I've ever heard.
It feels like with each year there's been new rule implementations clouding the pace and outcome of games, and diminished consistency on things like what is a catch, what constitutes holding, what is roughing the passer, and what is pass interference, to name a few of them. Not to mention the huge isolated controversies surrounding playoff games and other critical matchups that have only continued to serve as a reminder that officiating has not only been far from perfect, but it has outright ruined games for teams that have to own the consequences of mistakes that are not their own. In terms of how the quality and consistency of NFL officiating has reached such a low in recent seasons, there are any number of directions that you can look in to throw a flag at, so to speak. But if referees are going to survive in the modern NFL in spite of the harsh ecosystem that it is, somebody's going to have to fix it. One of the hottest topics right now when it comes to officiating controversy has been the NFL's senior VP of officiating, Al Riveron. Riveron sits at the top of the referee hierarchy and has done so since 2017 following the departure of officiating chair Dean Blandino to the ever-growing machine of network analysts, and it hasn't been the prettiest run for Al in that span. Many people's main problem with Riveron is the fact that he is the monarch of replay review, in spite of another fact that very few people ever actually agree with his judgments. But considering the league has given him and him alone the final say on calls, there's not really much to do other than just complain emptily into the night sky, because Riveron's general lack of accountability or remorse for botched rulings has thus far led to no reshuffling in that power structure. That at least looks to be changing though, especially after a 2019 season that saw the complete and utter failure of the pass interference challenge rule that was instituted after one of the worst no calls in league history during the 2018 NFC Championship game. It was pretty clear from the outset that this rule was disliked by Riveron immensely, likely seeing it as a slant to the judgment of his referees, and as a result, the rule seemed to be dead in the water from the start, with an especial rarity in overturning coaches' challenges, with 15 out of 81 being reversed on the year. I mean, it was always a risky move to implement challenges into one of the most subjective areas of the sport, but the set standard being near homicide and the outright cold shoulder teams received on obvious violations just made it all the more clear that Riveron is overmatched to attempt to oversee the entirety of the NFL. As much as they'd probably like to, the league can't ignore this fact for any longer, considering they've made it apparent that leadership changes are coming. Likely not in firing Riveron outright, but at the very least restructuring the roles at the top to ease responsibilities and provide more opportunities to create a consistent but fairly balanced enforcement of the rules. And I certainly hope they can strike that balance, because for too many years now it feels like it's just been one rules controversy traded out for another, with the standard of the solution typically being set astronomically high before having to be lowered back down to earth in the following seasons. A perfect example of this can be found in the multi-year saga regarding the existential question of what is a catch? A lot of the issues within that span of time stemmed from the fact that officiating executives wanted to do their best to have a perfect, objective standard for what a catch would be. Full control of the ball, a football move, surviving the ground, all of these boxes needed to be ticked in order to have an objective and indisputable catch. But all that managed to do was create a near impossible standard that just served to piss people off more than if they just hadn't gone so far in that direction in the first place. But I guess that overreact and correct is the nature of the beast when it comes to the rule of law everywhere, so we've just got to deal with seeing it over and over and over again. So ultimately, when it comes to major issues like that, it's not always an issue of the on-field refs messing up the rules. A lot of times the rules are just convoluted or bad. But when the refs do mess up horribly, that has to do with... Once you have a set, consistent standard that you want enforced, which is admittedly a pretty big ask for the NFL, then you've got to get your enforcers all on the same page, which has been an even bigger ask for the NFL, at least as of late. The league employs a grand total of 2 trainers for its 124 officials that are on payroll, and it's been a common complaint that officials simply haven't been receiving the standard of training that's necessary to keep up with a fast-changing NFL in comparison to previous eras of referee leadership. Even the NFL Referees Association in itself has demanded a higher standard of mentorship and training for its officials. But that only solves part of the issue in regards to the league's pool of referees and their respective skill levels, because similar to in the NFL, the talent of officials is also a revolving door. A much slower revolving door, but still a revolving door nonetheless. And the pool of officials that are coming into the league is shrinking by the year, possibly as a result of scrutiny, pressure, and hatred being at all-time highs, or possibly because more referees just don't see much of a benefit in making the jump up to the pros anymore. On the other end of the spectrum, however, NFL referees with 20+ years of experience are now being incentivized to retire due to the fact that they also might not be the best possible officials at their age. So it's a double-edged sword that diminishes the overall quality of NFL referees from both ends. As a small add-on to the list of things that do not help, the NFL also removed its program to bring on around 20% of its referees as full-time employees after a few years in 2017. Because even though that wasn't an end-all be-all solution, it's hard to say that less hours dedicated to improving the quality of officials is really a net positive. The reality is, referees are retiring quick with their new benefits without a new crop of elite officials to take over for them, and that's something that's going to require the NFL to take a good long look in the mirror at going forward. Speaking of, what do mirrors and NFL officiating both have in common? This has got to be one of the biggest gripes among fans, players, and coaches alike, because when those players or coaches or GMs cost their team a game or multiple games, they have their feet put to the fire immediately in constant interactions with the media that hold them accountable. Obviously, referees are held accountable in a different way between internal reviews and externally in the age of social media, but it all too often feels as though a referee can make a game-altering error and then just slink back into the void while the league provides a very weak statement about how they got it wrong. Referees are very, very rarely, if ever, fined or suspended, and in fact, only one official has ever been fired in the middle of a season during the entirety of the Super Bowl era, and that firing was for missing one blatant false start call. And with that coming out of the blue like that, that probably just made the standards of accountability even more confusing and more erratic. The league is definitely in desperate need of more stringent and transparent ground rules when it comes to officiating errors, including fines and other disciplinary actions. But not only is more accountability needed for the errors of referees, but the logic of the officiating crew on these controversial rulings has to be made more clear to the fans right when it happens. Every single Sunday, you have broadcast analysts who are former referees trying to make sense of those rulings on the field and the communications they have with New York. But then at that point, why not just broadcast those communications? I mean, the XFL had a great idea to place microphones on their referees to give that additional lens into a very, very important aspect of the game, and without any attempt made in the NFL to rationalize these important decisions, apart from the guys in charge said so, it legitimately cuts away at the integrity of the game. I mean, Kamish, Roger, Buddy, why else do you think so many people are convinced that your games are rigged? It's like a shadow club down there, and just trying to just sweep it under the rug and move to the next story after one of these mistakes is part of the problem for so many NFL fans. Just own it. So how do you fix it? How do you reverse the de-evolution of the quality of referees? Well, don't lose all hope, because there are a number of solutions on the table, and while the league might be hesitant to change too much too fast, the reality is this problem is not going to work itself out on its own. Among these ideas would be an increase in accountability alongside an increase in salary, because that increased pressure is deserving of increased compensation, or efforts to have referees work with teams on rule changes during the off-season rather than just trying to overemphasize new rules early in the season like they always do, maybe restructuring the management at the top and then offering top dollar to those key figures that are bailing for network jobs because the stress reduction outweighs the title of being an officiating executive, or how about increasing the ratio of training professionals to referees to provide them with the necessary mechanics to avoid those egregious errors. I mean, you could even potentially bring back that full-time officiating program. You've got the money. I mean, credit where credit is due. There are a few propositions out there that aim to ease the burden on officials coming directly from the teams within the league, such as implementing a booth umpire to provide support to referees from up above, similar to the sky judge concept in the NFL, but the NFL's officiating problem is one that stems from the core of how they operate that branch of the game. Secrecy, a lack of consistency and training, absolute power vested in too few individuals, and overall, as with too many negative aspects of football, a complacency to just brush it under the rug so long as the revenue stream doesn't drop off too significantly. Because in reality, just like how groups evolve in nature, NFL officials are just a result of their environment. They're just doing their job to survive. So in the end, the men in stripes can get all the hate you can give them for the gaffes that they make against your favorite team, but if we want this problem to be fixed for real, we might need to look a little bit higher up the food chain.